Thank you. Well, Honorable Speaker, I rise in support of Bill number 17. And Mr. Speaker, this simple amendment has been made the subject of the most cynical opposition I've seen in all my years in politics. I support what Honorable Mbulitavo has just said, not because he's a member of SODELPA, but I support the fact that he's a young man with land and he wants to do development on his land for his people. And this is a bill that will help him. My statement, Mr. Speaker, is not intended for members opposite, because I know the facts have not swayed them. I am speaking to the Fijian people, all of whom deserve to know the truth about the bill. As Honorable Minister for Defense stated, we have to speak on the truth about the bill. Today, we are making the TLTP more efficient in how it enforces the terms and conditions of leases on iTaukei land. We are reforming a broken, time-wasting, and piecemeal approval process in favor of a process that empowers the TLTP to focus on improving the value of iTaukei land and making a more strategic approach to ensure long-term prosperity for iTaukei landowners. One thing this bill will not do, Mr. Speaker, is to change the rights or steal the decision-making power of iTaukei landowners. Not one bit. The landowner has never been involved in the process of enforcing lease terms and conditions. It is always been a matter handled by the TLTB, who are legally empowered to do so, even though they have been legally required to grant consent for change in mortgage, connecting water and electricity. The TLTB never contact the landowners about these matters. Mr. Speaker, it has never been the policy of TLTB to alert landowners when their lessee wants to change who they bank with or when they want to access water or any other development. There are normal permitting requirements for electricity, for water, for sewage, and other services, and sufficient checks exist through the relevant organizations such as EFL, the Water Authority of Fiji, and Ministry of Environment to ensure that these are all carried out properly in accordance with the relevant laws. It is a lie to claim that landowners have a role in the process. It is an administrative matter. And I was worried, Mr. Speaker, of the comments by Honorable Ngavoka when he said, if you pass the bill, and I was waiting for him to finish his sentence because I was worried. It looked like he was threatening me and threatening the Fiji First government. If you pass the bill, for all of those members of the opposition who are harping about police investigation, I suggest you learn about what transpired in Lautoka last Saturday with the Taukei movement. Learn from that. Find out what transpired. And maybe that will justify the police in doing what they did in the investigation. But I say again, if a lessee ever steps out of line, they will be held accountable. TLTB will still evict a lessee who doesn't pay lease monies or breaches the fundamental terms and condition. TLTB will still manage the process of leasing the land itself. After the landowning unit in question has agreed to the lease, to lease the land, like any proper lessor, they will continue to enforce the terms of leases. If any lessee violates the terms and conditions of their lease on iTaukei land, the TLTB will hold them accountable. This is what they have been doing. That is the case today, and they will continue to be the case tomorrow after this bill becomes law. Mr. Speaker, there's been a lot of talk about lawyers being asked to provide legal advice. I don't know why Biman never asked for the legal advice of that of the former NFP president, Tupo Mbawandra. I thought she was a top lawyer. She gives good advice. But I couldn't figure out for the life of me why these two lawyers, one that went on a Zoom last weekend, and of course the one in the Fiji Times today, where everybody is propping him up. How come they did not make sense of 12.1? There's a legal advice about 12.1. What above section 12.1 simply means is that if a buyer and seller wants to make a deal on TLTB land, whether to sell, transfer, or sublease, they must first apply to TLTB to obtain their consent. This also applies to transfer between parents and children or relatives where money is involved. They are also required to apply to TLTB for consent. If a transfer is done without a consent being obtained from TLTB, then that transfer is null and void. It simply means that the transfer is of no legal, is of no effect or illegal.
Yeah.
What this new bill proposes to do, Mr. Speaker, is to add two new subsections to section 12 above. That is all meaning that section 12.1 is still alive, and not affected at all by this new amendment. In the article today, in today's Fiji Times, the lawyer Graham Leong is using section 11 of the Itaukei Affairs Act to argue that consultation should have been held with the Itaukei Affairs Board. However, his argument is flawed for a number of reasons. Let me state them. Firstly, section 11 only applies if the bill appears to the minister to affect in any important matter the rights and interests of the Itaukei. The main point of Bill 17, Mr. Speaker, with respect to the removal of consent for mortgages, is that the removal of consent does not in any way affect the rights or interests of the Itaukei landowners. The leased Itaukei land that is subject to mortgage will always remain Itaukei land, and all terms and conditions of the lease remain intact. Secondly, section 11 does not apply to bills which are so urgent that public interest does not permit consultation. Bill 17 has been tabled as an urgent bill in accordance with the Constitution and the standing orders. I also want to remind Honorable Tusao, Mr. Speaker, that even with the presence of the entrenched provision that they always harp about in the previous constitution, Momi and Danarau got taken away of Itaukei ownership land. Ownership. Gone. No more with Itaukei. They are now justifying that with the subject of a land swap. Land swap aside, it's gone. The land is gone. That will never happen. That can never happen with this constitution. This constitution guarantees. Mr. Speaker, the TLTB supports this reform because they don't need to be involved at every baby step of development on the lease. with this amendment passed by Parliament, the landowner will notice nothing negative, nothing wilting down his or own ownership rights, except that there will be more interest in leasing iTaukei land because there will be less bureaucracy attached to iTaukei land. And that's where Honorable Buritavo is coming from. And therefore, the value of iTaukei land will increase. And isn't that what we all want for landowners? We're talking about socio-economic advancement, Mr. Speaker. We're about generational wealth, Mr. Speaker. We're talking about making the iTaukei people strong, productive, and innovative so that they can benefit from their land and our economy. I thought we all wanted that, Mr. Speaker. I really did. But the opposition has shown that they could not care less about the security and the prosperity of landowners. They are so little, Mr. Speaker, that they've used this bill, a good bill, as their distraction of choice from a budget they are terrified to talk about. They do not want to talk about the budget. They know it is a good budget. Some of them have admitted as much. Some of them have even called it an election budget. The rest refuse to talk about it. They don't want to talk about the cost it lifts on the shoulders of hardworking people. They don't want to talk about the doctors and nurses it has. They don't want to talk about the strategy it supports to recover our economy. Instead, they got in a room together, gathered around Honorable Tambuya, TikTok compulsive liar, and made a very poor bet on the legal advice and legal expertise. That in itself is a catastrophe. They knew that they were not qualified, capable of debating the measures in the budget. They knew they had no ideas to give the nation. They knew they had no alternative budget. And they knew they had zero constructive criticism to offer. So they decided to die on the hill of Bill 17. A bill they have not read and clearly do not understand. They chose the same inane chorus of criticism designed to frighten the iTaukei people into thinking that this government is threatening their traditional landowner rights. Their criticism began as a usual demagoguery. They decried what they claimed was a threat to landowner rights. They repeated lie after lie. One by one, their claims proved false until they realized they were on legally soft ground. And overnight, Mr. Speaker, their arguments flipped on their head. Now they have a new position. They say we should have consulted the landowners. This is the old political bait and switch, Mr. Speaker. If you can attack the substance, then maybe you can attack the process. They no longer say there is anything wrong with this bill, because there isn't. It is a sensible and rational reform. Instead, they are saying we should have consulted the landowners over an administrative process that has never involved the landowners, and they demanded to know why we didn't. When you don't have an answer, Mr. Speaker, unfortunately, a fool can ask more questions than a wise man can answer. I suppose it would help the opposition if the opposition had a coherent philosophy of government. Then maybe they could provide a coherent criticism. They might even stop squabbling among themselves long enough to be a rational opposition. But the opposition appears to exist for the pure purpose of opposition. First, they decide to oppose, and then they decide what to oppose and why. But all they peddle is fear and racism, Mr. Speaker, and they are doing it again. They are doing it again. Mr. Speaker, I really think we should thank them, silly as they are, because their argument that we should consult the landowners is a tacit acknowledgement that the bill is a good bill and that they have no reason to oppose it on substance. They know that. and some of their members have even said so in public and in private. Yet they have shamelessly encouraged people to sign different petitions based on the falsehoods and fear-mongering, and they should be ashamed. Honorable Rotemu Mukiapa stood up this afternoon and mentioned all the names of the chiefs, including the name of the Tidakau, who's present in Parliament, and of course herself, Marama Rokotu Ndeketi. I'm sorry to tell Tinamosi and the Ratu from Madwata, they are not included in this acknowledgement by Rotemu. They have shamelessly encouraged people to sign different petitions based on their falsehood and fear-mongering, and they should be ashamed. Have we had enough of this in our history? To the people who signed that petition under false pretenses, I say you should demand an apology, because they ask you to fix your good name to a lie. You have been misled. Past governments have betrayed the trust of landowners. They permanently alienated iTaukei land in Danarau and Momi. My government has never made that bad deal. And this bill aligns with our record of empowerment that we've established from day one. The bill simply streamlines the process of developing land that has already been leased. Once the TRTB approves the lease, the lessee does not have to return to the TRTB to have the mundane approved. This will make matters easier, faster, and less costly for the lessee. And that is a good thing. It will create economic activity. It will create jobs. It will create more prosperity and more so for the landowners. Mr. Speaker, this isn't the first time we've made important changes for the benefit of landowners. When we launched the better utilization for land payment program, if the opposition bothered to identify Cebu, government stepped in to pay more lease monies to landowners for renewal of leases. This government did that. We didn't consult landowners, asking them what they wanted more money. But they can renew leases and get more money. And the same goes for Bill 17. If landowners want to lease their land, they should receive the highest possible market lease income. This bill does that. It makes iTaukei land attractive as any other type of leased land, so that if and only if a land-owning unit agrees to lease out their land, agrees to the terms and conditions of the lease, they get better returns. Mr. Speaker, thanks to Ms. TikTok and a pack of disingenuous folks, that truth has been muddled beyond recognition for some landowning communities. Because of the misinformation out there, and because of our utter unwillingness to admit being wrong, we have to waste time and money to counter misinformation spread by opportunistic politicians. Teams from the LTB should hear that. This reminds me, Honorable Speaker, when Sodelpa was peddling lies about Kandabu being sold to the Chinese. I don't know, they probably did. And lies in 2014 that our constitution would franchise iTaukei landowners and put them on reservations. The misinformation spread on Bill 17 fits into the same category of the fanciful, and the ridiculous, and the stupid. Mr. Speaker, I want to tell Honorable Sekuru not to insult the camaraderie of Fiji members of the 7th team by only announcing some of their names and not the rest. There are 13 members plus the coach plus the management that brought gold to us last couple of days. Please remember that. I want to, Mr. Speaker, I want to again congratulate our men's sevens rugby team on their incredible run to their 2nd Olympic gold medal. Coach Baiba was tasked with filling the biggest shoes in all rugby, and he delivered brilliantly. I believe he's earned a home in Fiji for all time, and we are making the arrangement to afford him a lease on iTaukei land, should he accept. If he does build a home, thanks to this bill, the TLTB won't waste any time following up those plans. Thank you, boys. Thank you for the wonderful game. Naka coach, and welcome home. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I thank the Honourable Prime Minister for his contribution to the debate.